violence against the opposition, ballot stuffing. People in Western Kenya, I was in Kenya in 1997. The first time I was in Kenya was at the time of that election in an opposition region, and none of my friends could get voter registration cards. It didn't matter how many times they went to try to get voter registration cards. They couldn't, because very few voter registration cards were being sent to opposition regions. Lots of voter registration cards were being sent to loyal regions to the president. So even though this is called democracy, it's certainly not a perfect democracy under Moi, but there were elections, there was an opposition, there was a very active media, there were protests, like there was a different political equilibrium. If you tried to protest against Moi in 1985, he would have just crushed you. He would have just shot you down, arrested you, tortured you. There were notorious, torture, prisons, etc. Okay. Then there's an election in 2003. Mwai Kibaki wins, and he ruled for 2 terms until 2013, but we only have data through 2011 here. Kibaki had been Moi's vice president, too. So these are all this small group of leaders who were basically all members of parliament since independence, cutting deals with each other sort of over time. Kibaki broke with Moi, though, to join the opposition in 92, and ended up winning in 2002 with a very broad ethnic coalition. And so he won the presidency. Again, I know there's lots of names here. You don't have to memorize every single aspect. I just want to emphasize that there's democracy, autocracy, democracy, which is nice. And in both the democratic periods and the autocratic periods, there's 2 different ethnic groups that are in power. There are Kikuyu-dominated periods of democracy and autocracy, and Kalenjin-dominated periods of democracy and autocracy. So that means we can get a handle on how, under the same ruler, Moi or Kenyatta, what does public policy look like when they have more democratic constraints on them or less democratic constraints on the same ruler. So that's kind of useful for us. Let me pause for a second. Yeah. He was totally forced to. He never would have done it. But the combination of big popular protests that he was sort of unable to control at some time with international pressure made him back down. So he basically was forced in 92 to have an election, but he ended up winning the 92 and 97 elections by rigging the election. So the truth is that the kind of African democratization experience shows in many countries, the first couple elections are really unfair, but in many cases they trend towards fair and fair elections over time. The opposition gets better organized, parliament gets more powerful, but he basically held on for another decade even after being forced to democratize. At that point, some African leaders, it was a big wave of democratization in the early 90s, some were forced to step down or they were unwilling to allow the opposition to run. So, yeah. He started getting challenged, and he didn't like getting challenged. He, I think, of heart was a very autocratic leader, Kenyatta, and in the first couple years after independence, there was the sort of warm glow of independence and whatnot, but by the mid-60s, people started challenging him, and there's a famous incident where he went to Western Kenya, to Kisumu, the largest city in Kisumu, and people were like protesting while he was there and throwing eggs at his motorcade and whatnot, and he was enraged, and that was actually part of a crack. Soon after that, he basically cracked down on opposition leaders from that region. So I don't think, you can't, in some sense, Kenyatta is someone who's raised in a colonial period that was so brutal and so violent and so autocratic by nature, and that was sort of the political environment he had been raised in some ways. I'm not trying to justify as much as understand that. There's a continuity from the kind of autocratic colonial period to these autocratic post-independence periods. I'm not saying it's right. Okay, one more thing to keep in mind. We're going to focus on what I'm going to call co-ethnic districts. What is a co-ethnic district? When there's a Kikuyu president, it's all the districts with majority Kikuyu populations. On average, they're like 90% Kikuyu. When there's a Kalenjin president, a co-ethnic district is a district with a majority Kalenjin population. So that's how we're going to divide, and we're going to look at where the road funding goes. Does it go to Kikuyu areas when there's a Kikuyu president? Does it go to Kalenjin areas when there's a Kalenjin president? And does that relationship differ in a democratic period? In other words, in this middle autocratic period, are they more or less biased in their targeting of the road money? We saw before, you guys are kind of split on what you think is going to happen. So let me show you what happens. Okay, there's 2 types of districts. Remember, co-ethnic with the president, just mentioned that, the blue ones. Non-co-ethnic, a different ethnic group, that's the red. 1 is a good number to keep in mind. Remember, based on our measure before, 1 means you get the same as the national average. If you're above 1, it means you're getting more than the national average. So what do people kind of see here? What happens in that autocratic period? More or less ethnic targeting? Like a lot more, like 2 or 3 times more. So in fact, we can kind of get a kind of guesstimate here. If you take the average across these different periods, in the democratic sort of 1960s, the blue and the red lines are pretty similar, they're close to 1. As soon as Kenyatta gets rid of the opposition, he just starts targeting resources to Kikuyu areas massively. That's what happens through the 1970s. The dashed line here is when Kenyatta dies. But it continues under President Moi, basically up until democracy is reinstated, and then that blue line starts coming down. Now, so on average in the democratic period, it's flatter. Actually, I drew this wrong. That red line should go to this red line here. I did it to this dash line, which was a mistake when I was making these lines. So what it should really be is through here, sorry. And then there should be another line basically here for this democratic period, okay? Yeah. 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 Yeah, so you'll see in this middle period, the non-co-ethnic regions are always a little bit below 1. So there's 2 reasons why that you're pointing out something great, which is it feels so asymmetric. The blue one is way up there. The red one's only just barely below 1. There's 2 reasons why. One is there's a lot more non-co-ethnic regions than co-ethnic regions. The co-ethnic regions are only 16%, so 1/6. So even though this is only a little bit below 1, there's 5 times as many districts here as there are on the blue line. So that's part of the reason. The other has to do with the asymmetry around 1. So even if there were only 2 districts, if there were twice as much going to one district and half as much going to the other, the red line would still be at 0.5, even if the blue line were at 2. So just because we're dealing with sort of, you guys get where I'm going with that? So there's 2 reasons why it looks like the red line is really close to 1. But for some of these years here, this is at 0.7. So it's actually a substantial dip below 1. But it's good you pointed that out. Yeah, Jan. Yeah, so it's really interesting. Basically, right around the time Moi leaves power, he basically didn't fund any roads in Kalenjin areas that year. And in fact, it had been dropping for some time. So that's kind of interesting. He had been investing a ton, and he stopped when he handed over power. And then you see this huge spike just for like 2 years for funding in Kikuyu areas. This is why Kibaki is president now. Kikuyus haven't been in power at this point for 25 years. The first thing Kibaki does, even under democracy, is he builds a bunch of roads in Kikuyu areas, but then it kind of comes back down. So there was this like temporary burst in Kikuyu areas. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. This is an election year, so you see a spike here. this is another election year. So in these 2 election years, Moy had less blatant favoritism for his region in like 97 and in 2002 than he did in other years. That's a great observation. In 92, he knew he was going to win. He had totally rigged that election. 97, there was at least a little bit of doubt. So he didn't worry about it there. But in 97 and 2002, you see this sort of drop down where maybe he's trying not to look as blatant in spending towards his own region. Yeah.
What was the political atmosphere in 2002? Was it kind of expected that Moy was going to win? Or was it like
So towards the end of sort of 6 months before the election, he announced he wasn't going to run. He didn't run. He was like term limited out at this point. So there was a new constitution that came in. Well, it wasn't really a new constitution. They kind of reset the constitution. The new constitution didn't come in until 2011. But he got 2 more terms. And the question running up to 2002 was, is he going to try to change the constitution to get another term? He didn't. He stepped down. And Kibaki ran against Uhuru Kenyatta, who's now the president. It's very confusing. Uhuru Kenyatta and Kibaki basically are now allies, but at the time they ran against each other. But Uhuru Kenyatta was very young at that time. He was like in his late 30s. He wasn't a very polished politician. By sort of handing over the candidacy of the ruling party to Uhuru Kenyatta, Moy was basically just giving up the election. He let the opposition win that election. And Kibaki put together this big multi-ethnic alliance. It was a really celebratory moment because the same party had been in power from 1963 to 2002. So for basically 40 years, the same party had been in power, very repressive party, and most of its time. And they were defeated, and they kind of disappeared. There's basically no KANU anymore. But Uhuru Kenyatta, who lost, formed his own party and ended up winning the election 2 elections later. Okay, let me show you some more results. This is the regression result. And the measure we have on top of here is just what I showed you before. This is what we had called road sub dt, per capita road spending. And this is in shares, so this is relative to the national average. And what you can see is overall during this period, the coefficient estimate on being a co-ethnic of the president was about 1. How to interpret that? The average of the outcome variable is 1 overall. It has to be 1. The average is 1. So what this is saying is this is 1 greater than the average in co-ethnic districts. So the average is 2. It's 1 plus this effect. So being a co-ethnic district overall means you got twice as much road funding during this period on average. That's how to interpret that point estimate. So basically it's sort of like 1 plus 1. But let me show you panel B. That's a different regression. Panel B is interesting. There we look at the effect overall and then see, is there a different effect in democratic periods? That's that second term. And what do we find? The interpretation of this first term is that's the co-ethnic effect in autocratic periods. The effect in democratic periods is the sum of these 2 terms. You take into account any differential effect in a democratic period. So there's 2 different effects. In autocratic periods, the effect is about 1 plus, it's going to be this 1 plus thing, 1.57. So in autocratic periods, it's about 2.5. So it's even worse in autocratic periods. In democratic periods, the sum of those 2 terms is about, what is it, 0.4, right? So it's 1 plus 1.57, sorry, there's a title here, minus 1.11. So that's about 1.4. Okay, so on average, darn you, clicker. Sorry. Okay. Even in democratic periods, co-ethnic areas get about 40% more. It's not statistically significant. It's not huge, but there's something. But in autocratic periods, they get way more. 2.5 is the ratio. Huge effect. There's tons of ethnic bias in road spending. And democracy tends to reduce the bias. This is an interesting result. Democracy, yes, the transition to democracy was messy. I was telling you about rigged elections and violence and all this stuff. But it did deliver something to Kenya. It meant presidents were not as unconstrained and just favoring their own group anymore. They had to cut deals with the opposition. They had to respect a more democratic process. Yeah? Sorry? Yeah, those are just 2 different regressions. Panel A only has that one co-ethnic indicator, dummy variable, and panel B has that times democracy. So these are 2 different regressions. So just to be very clear, this is sort of like regression 1, and this is regression 2. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that. Okay, so let me show you a little bit more. We have 6 minutes, 7 minutes left. Any last questions on this? I'll show you what looks more like raw data. Okay, so now instead of grouping by co-ethnic and non-co-ethnic, we're going to look at Kikuyu areas, Kalenjin areas, and other. Okay, so let's focus on the Kikuyus first. As we saw before in the democratic period, not too much bias. After the opposition is made illegal, tons of bias in favor of Kikuyus. It gets over 2, the ratio. Kenyatta dies. What happens when Kenyatta dies? That blue line starts falling right away. The amount of funding going to Kikuyu areas falls, all the way down. Actually, I misspoke before. This 0 funding was the year Kibaki came into power as a Kikuyu, but it meant that Moi had given 0 to the Kikuyus in that year. That's the right interpretation. I misinterpreted it. As soon as Kibaki comes into power as a Kikuyu funding skyrockets immediately, back up to like 2, and then it kind of settles down, and after that it settles down a little bit. But it's just amazing. How about Kalenjin districts? Kalenjins weren't getting too much, even though here Moi was the vice president. Kenyatta wasn't giving his region very much at all in terms of funding, the red Kalenjin areas. Kenyatta dies. Literally the next year, it skyrockets. And Kalenjin areas start getting 2, 3 times, almost 3 times as much funding. Then when democracy is reintroduced, it starts trending downward. And sort of, at this point, Kibaki, Kikuyu is president, he's not giving anything to the Kalenjins. And all along the way, the other districts are getting screwed over. The other districts are way below 1. That's the green line. So it gets back to the point before, that you made, which is the other districts in this whole period are just getting way less than the national average of road funding. Do you folks see any other patterns in this plot? It's pretty stark when you see it, yeah. Yeah, it was like they felt like they were kind of getting screwed over for a while there, and so when Moi comes into power, there's an incredible year over 2 or 3 years, it goes from getting no funding to getting almost all the funding. There was tons of public works projects built in Kalenjin areas in the Rift Valley, roads, power plants, Moi University, Moi International Airport. I'm serious. It's, he brought the money, so he named it after himself. I mean, no constraints really. Yeah, there really weren't any constraints on him, so he could do that. Radhika. Yeah, I think so. I think this dip has to correspond to the big increase in Kikuyu areas, but then it kind of gets back close to 1 again, so it looks a little bit more balanced than it had been. what's interesting here is in this period, in the run-up to the 2002 election, the other regions started doing a bit better. And the feeling was there was going to be this political transition. At some point, Moise announced he's going to step down, and no one knew what was going to happen. So I think that, there was spending kind of broadly, and this big multi-ethnic coalition was built. I think that was a very interesting turnaround. It's also a period where the roads minister for about 2 years here is Raila Odinga, a Luo, an ethnic Luo, and he started building all these roads near where we work in Western Kenya. So he was sort of favoring his own region. So it is kind of ethnic favoritism, but of a different kind. Okay, let me just wrap up. I'm going to skip this table. It just basically shows in regressions what I showed you in the figure. But let's get to another clicker question. In your opinion, what impact did these kinds of road investment distortions, meaning the targeting by ethnic group, have on economic growth in Kenya? We have different opinions. One would be, not much. Like, fine, they built a couple Kikuyu area roads, later they built some Kalenjin area roads, they kind of spread it around eventually. Maybe it doesn't matter. A, maybe some areas that needed roads couldn't get them for a while, so moderate impact. C, maybe this is just the tip of the iceberg. Maybe all this distorted ethnic investment just totally crushed some regions and helped others. And then D, it's hard to say with any confidence. Okay, so again, it's kind of mixed. Most of you think there's going to be some impact, either moderate, or a lot of you think it's going to be large. So actually, there's some suggested evidence that there is some effect. I told you about Easterly and Levine last time. More ethnically diverse countries in Africa grow slower. At the end of this paper, we rerun their analysis. And we look at countries in Africa that became more democratic. And we ask the question, it's just like the regression I showed you, pretty much. Is that negative diversity growth effect smaller when you have a democratic system in place? Can democracy kind of constrain the worst abuses in terms of ethnic divisions? And we find that it does. The negative growth effect of ethnic diversity goes away in more democratic African countries. So this is another piece of evidence that when democracy comes in, not only do you limit this kind of distorted investment that we showed, but there could be an aggregate benefit for the whole economy because you don't have as much misallocation of resources as you do under autocracy. So that's table 6 of the paper. Okay, see you guys on Thursday.